Mareike is going to speak for us next. We're going to get a different perspective now, a different point of view. So Mareike is an assistant professor in Bentley University's IPM department. She conducts research in the field of information systems management. Major research interests include algorithmic management and the future of work, and secondly, trust and reputation on sharing economy platforms. She conducts both qualitative and quantitative research alike. Great to see you on my screen. She has worked as an assistant professor at Warwick Business School, so a place where Paul Levy spends a lot of time, and a visiting scholar teaching fellow at the London School of Economics. Also a postdoc researcher at NYU's Stern School of Business. She holds a doctoral degree in business and management from the University of Hamburg and an MSc in management from the London School of Economics. She started her career in academia. Before that, she worked for the United Nations at the New York City office on topics such as sustainability, climate change, and the green economy. So Google Scholar reports that her work is cited 500 times plus a year. And one of the first articles she published during her PhD back in 2015 was cited more than 1,000 times. It was also the Journal of Consumer Behavior's most cited article in the last 3 years, and that was of 2020. Mareike, you are incredibly welcome. It's a great honor and privilege to host you today. We'll put a proverbial 18 minutes on the clock. I will come off the stage and give you that space and time. Thank you for sharing some thoughts with us today.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Perfect. So thanks for the warm welcome, and hi from Greater Boston, right? I'm based in Greater Boston, based at Bentley University. And thanks for inviting me. It's a great event. You do such important work, and I really enjoyed the last couple of presentations. So thanks for inviting me. So this is an overview over my work focusing on algorithmic nudging and related topics such as algorithmic management. And we've heard, different perspectives were presented. So given that most of my work actually focuses on algorithmic nudging in the context of the ride-hailing platform Uber, this is the context or case I will mainly be focusing on today, but my thoughts are of course well applicable beyond this specific context. But let's get started with the problem from Uber's perspective. So in the last couple of years, there have been heated discussions addressing the question whether Uber drivers, whether they should be classified as official employees or independent contractors. Right. So in most jurisdictions around the world, Uber drivers are officially classified as contractors rather than employees. That means that is a very cost-effective strategy for Uber, right? Because they do not need to pay benefits, for instance. However, that also means that Uber cannot officially delegate drivers to show up at a specific time, at a specific place, for instance. And that lack of control would then jeopardize the seamless production of service provision, right? So it wouldn't be good for customers if no drivers would turn up on time to pick them up, so to say. So one of the underlying issues here is really how companies control crowds without forcing them to do something. And of course, this is ethically questionable, right? And this is quite obvious, but more about that later. So what is important for us is that Uber tries to solve this problem by employing algorithmic nudging. So what we see is that companies are increasingly using algorithms to manage and control workforce, not by force, as we've heard earlier, but by nudging them into behavior, which means they learn from their personalized data and alter their choices in a more subtle way. So what is the difference between nudging and algorithmic nudging? So, the other speakers already focused on this really important work by Taylor and Sunstein. And, you know, we know that they, you know, were awarded with Nobel Memorial Prize in behavioral economics for their work. So it's, you know, it's groundbreaking work, right? So we know based on their work, we know that nudging can be very positive, right? So I just brought you this one example there, that people who use smaller plates, they put less food on the plates, right? So which means they eat less. They may live healthier lives even. There are other examples, right? Think about Virgin Atlantic, for instance. They reported that they use nudges to shape their employees' behavior by nudging their pilots into using less fuel. And this is, of course, very relevant because many of us here are interested in environmental sustainability and climate change. So algorithmic nudging is somehow different. I would say it's different. I would say it's more powerful. Why so? Recent advances in AI and machine learning lead to the fact that companies can collect huge amounts of data about individuals. These technologies help them to identify patterns, behavioral patterns in the data, and that allows them then, in turn, to develop personalized strategies. So they can really change individuals' behavior on much larger scale in a more personalized way. And they can do so in real time, right? Because if data flows in real time, they can adjust strategies on the go. So I think that really personalization and real-time adjustment make algorithmic nudging much more powerful. And I brought you one example here. This is, for instance, you know, nudge that Uber drivers may be exposed to, right? And you see that on the slides. So we know that Uber is using these psychological tricks to nudge drivers into driving longer. I think what is really important, and some of the previous speakers have kind of mentioned that point, but let me leverage on that a bit. Nudging is a double-edged sword, right? Yes, it can be very positive, as Thaler and Sunstein argued, right? So nudging can improve individuals' health and wealth and happiness. But on the other hand, nudges have really been subject to criticism, a lot of criticism more lately. And the reason is that there may be challenges associated with privacy violation, right? So another aspect is that nudges may be used to manipulate individuals to their disadvantage, right? We've heard about concerns about algorithmic transparency and algorithmic bias, right? Gender bias, for instance, that may be inherent to the algorithms exposing individuals to nudges. And one example, let's get back to Uber, is, for instance, that in July 2020, British Uber drivers filed a lawsuit against Uber, claiming that the company is failing to really fulfill its legal obligations under the GDPR, which is the data protection regulation of the EU, right? I think they did this before Brexit, I guess. But one of the points there was that Uber's algorithm lacked transparency. So yeah, nudging is a double-edged sword, very important. But what can companies do to design algorithmic nudges more ethically? So in this one of the HBR articles I've published, I came up with 3 major recommendations. Let me shortly walk through them. The first one is to create a win-win situation, right? Obviously, this is crucial, right? We think about organizations these days, often they may use nudges to their advantage, the company's advantage. But let's think about examples where we can create this win-win situation that benefits both sides, the company and the worker, or the company and the customer. So I can really think about a lot of potential examples, right, where nudges are used to increase worker safety, for instance, or convey them a feeling of appreciation. The second point is it's really important that companies share information or are transparent about data collection and data storage. And the GDPR sets a good standard here as well, right? Because it really requires companies to provide information about the nature of the personal user data that they collect and store. And the third one is that it's important to be transparent not only about the data that is being generated but, and the algorithms are being trained on, but about the algorithm itself, right? About the constantly changing algorithms. Of course, that is difficult because often they're company secrets and they are sometimes so complex that no one understands them, not even the data scientists, the managers, right, in the companies. But definitely a lot of companies can increase their efforts in increasing transparency of their algorithms logic. And yeah, so why is that important? Because it may allow individuals like consumers or workers, right, to make more informed decisions, whether they want to react to a nudge or not. Right, so it may also help to showcase that algorithmic nudges are not prone to racial or gender bias. And so one way here to move forward are counterfactual explanations. This is a rather non-technical way to showcase to non-technical personnel, employees or contractors, how, you know, how, for instance, the outcome of an algorithmic decision-making would have been different for a specific individual if they would have different attributes or characteristics, right? Think about one example. In case there's Uber driver and they have a rating of 4.2, in case all other variables are held constant and you change one variable, for instance, their rating was not 4.2 but 4.9, Uber could explain to the drivers what the effect would be for them. Would they make more money? Would they get more rides? Would they be matched to customers with higher ratings? And so on and so on. So counterfactual explanations could be one way forward. And then just general, these are management recommendations that I think are just generally good, or I would, you know, that I put out there in the context of algorithmic management, algorithmic nudging is share information, invite feedback, invite workers in, right? Talk to them. Build in human contact. If you know, in the context of Uber, for instance, drivers are exposed to these nudges and don't understand them, and they have no one to talk to, right? There's no human supervision. They're literally managed by an algorithm. Build trust is also important, right? Because you really want to create a trust relationship. So yeah, this is all I got. I think my time is up. Thanks, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mareike. And I think this is a brilliant talk in order to understand what is nudging, what are the pros and cons of nudging, and especially with the example that we saw with Uber, and why people should look at the positives and the negatives of digital nudging, and how we can actually bring about more ethics, because digital nudging always raises the questions. It is more psychological and economic. It's a combination of both. That is what digital nudging is about. And considering both of them, how can it create a win-win situation is so important, I think. And building transparency, trust, and ethics, not only within the data collection, the data processing, the storage, or how you are going to disclose your policies to the people, but also about the data itself, the collection of it, and what data it is, and on top of it, what is the algorithm that you are applying on top of it. Both are going to create that ethics, transparency, and reduce the bias that we already see in case of digital nudges. But I think what more is important is how we can bring out positive changes with help of the choices that we are being given, and reduce the negatives or the ethics which people are not following so far, but we need to be careful about that. So thank you so much, Dr. Mareike, and I think we will discuss all the questions in the panel discussion. And over to you, Richard, for the panel discussion.